All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. Let's get started for today. Thank you for joining today's webinar, a quick 30-minute session covering how to report on our newly fully remote workforce due to COVID-19. My name is Dan Schmidt, Systems Engineer here at Variphy, and I'll be your host today in today's webinar. Today I'm joined with Victor Verba and Mike Stratton, our superstar systems engineers in today's webinar. And like I said, today we're going to be covering ways we could use Variphy to report on your remote workforce, now very critical due to the COVID-19. Today we're gonna get started, provide a quick overview of our company and what we do. We'll jump into a live demonstration and guide you through everything Variphy can assist with when trying to manage a remote workforce. Victor will be showing us how Variphy can identify employee productivity with device adoption reporting, conference utilization reporting, and being able to provide device and trunk capacity reporting. After that, we'll pause for some Q&A and get your questions answered here. During the demo, if you have any questions at all, please make sure to address them in the Q&A panel in the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. After Q&A, we will reward one lucky winner with a $50 Amazon gift card, so hang around to see what you may have won. So a real quick overview of Variphy. Variphy is the preferred analytics and management solution for Cisco collaboration. We provide industry-leading CDR reporting and call analytics, customizable dashboards and widgets, UCCX reporting, remote phone control, change management. But in today's session, we're going to be covering different tips within the call analytics module. If you have any other questions on any of these other features, we can most certainly address those offline and get those answered for you. Today, before we get started, we do want to announce that Variphy now offers a new service that provides managed consulting services to our customers. Variphy's SE team will be engaged on a one-on-one basis to remotely provide additional consulting, unassisted reporting, dashboard configurations, system monitoring assistance. This is a new service that provides a dedicated Variphy SE to do the heavy lifting of report creation and generation. For more information, please contact us and we'd be glad to speak more in depth with you about our new service offering. So with that, let's get into it. Victor here is going to show us some methods we can use to accurately report on a remote workforce.
Great, thank you, Dan. Let me go ahead and get my screen shared out here. So we should be looking at the Variphy.com webinar splash page. Everything we're going to go ahead and cover here will be presented. So for anybody, if you have any folks that are unable to attend, you'll be able to go ahead and scroll down to the bottom section over here and visit our past webinars. So first thing first, let's go ahead and dig right into it. So few of the same things that we get on asked on a regular basis are things for how are we going to be able to report on our remote workforce? There's a lot of things changing in the environment today, so we need to be able to report on our soft phones, our Jabber devices, our IP frameworks, and things of that nature. The other thing that we get asked a lot is for capacity utilization. How are we doing from a capacity perspective now that all these folks are remote and things like that? And then last but not least, one of the big ones that we get asked for are, we're using a lot more conferencing activity. So how can we report on who's attending conferences? We have conferences on a regular basis. We want to make sure that the folks that are supposed to be there are the ones that are there. So we're going to go ahead and hit all three topics like that today. So the first one I'm going to go ahead and delve into, and I apologize if I'm running a little fast. We've got a lot to cover today. First one I'm going to go ahead and delve into is our remote workforce. That's probably one of the number one things that we're being requested and asked a lot for are how do we report on our remote employees? So let's dig right into it. So one of the nice things about the Variphy application is its ease of use, but as well as the fact that we're really kind of a no maintenance solution. In other words, everything that I'm going to be running a report on here is not maintained within the Variphy application. Variphy functions by going out to your call manager and reading criteria, rather than you having to worry about how you're going to get your extensions or your device pools or even your device types into Variphy. We read that information directly from your call manager, making it a very simple solution to have to maintain because there really is no maintenance into it. So with that in mind, the first thing we're going to go ahead and look at is we're going to look at our remote workforce. So one of the things that we can do is I can type in, IPC or search for devices that start with IPC. But that's a bit cumbersome. If somebody fat fingers something or something of that nature, you're not going to be able to go ahead and report on that. One of the advantages of benefits of Variphy is the fact that you don't have to worry about being specific. You can absolutely be specific and look for certain devices, but we don't necessarily have to do that. So right from our history screen, the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and search for some originating or terminating device types. So let's look for our unified frameworks. So here we're going to be looking at all of our Windows Jabber devices and things of that nature. So very easily, I'm just going to go ahead and add that as a search topic. Maybe we have IP communicators out there, so I want to be able to search all my IP communicators. Rather than having to worry about trying to enter individual device names or contains type information, we can search directly for it by the device type. Next thing I'm going to go ahead and add, and last but not least, is we're going to go ahead and add some of our Jabber for tablets. So who's using Jabber on their mobile devices rather than maybe computers or something of that nature. So first thing we did is we added a bunch of criteria. The way Variphy is going to function right now, what it's going to go ahead and do is it's going to go out to Call Manager. It's going to say, okay, I'm going to look for these 3 pieces of criteria, and then I need to be able to return all of the devices associated to that criteria. Once it finds all of the devices based on the device names, it's going to go ahead and go back to the CDR data that we're housing, and it's going to say, hey, here's all the information that you requested based on your remote information. And very quickly, I was able to pull up detailed information on all of my remote phones. But we want to expand on this. Detail is wonderful when you're trying to look through detail, but it's not the greatest thing. A lot of people want to be able to see, hey, I need to be able to see productivity for my departments. I need to see how my departments are performing now with their remote workforce. So let's go ahead and add another filter in here. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and pick on one particular department. And I'm going to say I'm going to pick on my finance department here. So now what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, show me all of the remote phones and some productivity based off of my finance department. I'm going to go ahead and click view results. And this is, again, going to bring me back all of the information, but now strictly focused on my finance department. So the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to drill into this metric because, like I said, detail is wonderful, but it's not what everybody wants to see. So let's go ahead and add some criteria to this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to export this report. Right from this call history search quick search screen, I have the ability to go ahead and save this report for future use. That means I can then schedule it daily, weekly, monthly, edit it, export it, send it to other people, and things like that. So we'll just call this VR phones. So that's our virtual phones right there. So next thing we're going to do is now that we've got our search, this is the information I'm looking for. I'm looking for my remote workforce. I'm looking for my remote workforce just for one particular organization. I want to set some stats. What do I want to see? I want to see the total count. I want to see the average call duration, total call duration, just some of the standard. I want to see the percentage of abandoned calls taking place. I want to see the percentage of calls that aren't being answered and maybe just rolling into the voicemail or the Unity system. We can also report on a lot of other things like transfer calls, forward calls, long duration calls, short duration calls, but we're going to go ahead and keep this simple for the purpose of this demonstration. So the next thing I want to see is, hey, this is great. I've got some summary information. You know what? I'd also like to be able to see that type of information on a weekly basis. So now, maybe I want to get a breakdown of each week. So my report here is going to be running for the last month and this month. So it's going to be nice to be able to get a weekly breakdown of how these devices are being utilized. What are the total call counts, average call counts, and things like that, abandonment ratios, voicemail ratios, and just some of the general stats. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a search, and then I'm going to go ahead and give you some stats off of my search. In other words, all my soft devices. I'm going to give you a weekly breakdown of how all my soft devices are going to be being used, but we're going to expand on that a little bit more. So it's great to be able to know how, in total, how my soft phone devices are being used, but I also want to be able to get some additional summary information. I want to know what devices are being used. So are people using their Jabber Windows devices? Are they using their IP communicators more, or are they using their cell phones Jabber devices more? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add what we call grouping. Grouping is a secondary layer of summary. So what we're going to group on this case is the device type. So I'm going to go ahead and group on that device type. Now what that's going to do is it's going to give us a breakdown of our search, which is our unified framework, our IP communicators, and our Jabber clients. And it's going to break down, and it's going to tell me the total count of calls, average call durations, It's going to tell me, my abandon ratios, and it's going to tell me my voicemail ratios based on each individual device type. And that's great information because now you're getting a clear summary of what devices you have within your field that are actually being used. But we're going to go ahead and add on this just a little bit more because not only do we want to see the devices, but what devices are they? IP communicator, which IP communicator, which Jabber client is being used. So we're going to break this down a little bit more by using what we call secondary grouping. So we're now going to be adding multiple layers of summary to this report. Our first set of summary is going to be based off of all of our remote devices. Our second layer of summary is going to be based on which type of the device it is. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and break this down even further and say out of all of those 3 devices, which ones are actually being used, and we're going to go ahead and include that summary information on each one of those. Now, some of you guys may be looking at secondary grouping and going, I don't know that I have that. This is something that is new in our 12.1.3 version. So if you don't have that, by all means, reach out to our support assistants here, and we'll work with you guys to make sure you guys get upgraded. Upgrades take all of 5 or 10 minutes to go ahead and run through. So now that we've got that information, let's go ahead and deliver our report. I'm going to run this in HTML format. I'm going to toggle off Cradle to Grave because I don't quite need that for this report, but we're going to circle back to that in a minute. So let's give this guy a quick run, and let's take a look at our statistics. So what it's doing right now is it's actually going out to your call manager. It's pulling off all of our soft phone devices. Then it's cross-comparing those devices to all the people that belong into our finance department. And it's going to formulate all of the people in our finance department, and then it's going to say, hey, these are the devices that are being used. Then it's going to go ahead and tell us each one of those individual devices. And then it's going to tell us even down to the level of the device name that was used. So let's look at our results here. So our first search was for all of our soft devices, but just for our finance department. We can see we had a total number of 41 calls over here. And then we added these average durations, abandonment ratios, and voicemail, all just point and click and add. The next thing we do is we turned on our initial grouping. Remember, if I remember, our initial grouping was based off of our device types. So here we're grouping off of our device types. And when we look at our report, here's our device types. So I could see of my Cisco IP communicators, I had 40 calls. So most people are using the IPC phones. Out of the other 1 call was my Cisco Unified Client Framework, so somebody's using their Jabber on their PC. Great information. Now I know how my devices are being used. If I'm rolling out more Jabbers on PCs than I am IP communicators, it's not being adopted. So now I have great information on that. But also I'm able to show each individual device that was being used. So now I can see that, JBR eFox device from an IP communicator was used 22 times, 18 times for my other IP communicator, and then just once for my client services framework. Each one of these are hyperlinks. If I go ahead and click on that, it's going to bring me down to the detail of each one of those calls, but only because I chose to include detail on each one of those calls. So from the purpose or the point of the perspective of being able to report on your remote workforce, right now within a matter of a few minutes, we've created a great report that's going to outline all of your soft devices, and you can continue to add on here. I just added a few that I know that we have, but there's a lot of other devices that could be within your location that you may be able to add. The nice thing about it is you're not worrying about those individual device names or how those were named or having to focus on individual extensions. You could just pick on the device types. All right. So with that said, the next thing I'm going to go ahead and delve a little bit into is going to be our conferencing. So I would say maybe the number 2, it's kind of a tie between our capacity utilization and conferencing. We're seeing conferencing being much more adopted now with the remote workforce. People aren't able to just reach around the cube and ask other people questions or just bring people in. So we're starting to see conferencing being much more adopted. So the next thing we're going to go ahead and walk through here is building just a very quick conference report. So there's a lot of different conferencing methods. There could be Meet Me Conference, Conference Now, somebody just hitting the conference on the phone button. So there's a lot of different ways to be able to report this. I'm going to go ahead and walk through just a couple of them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my search here. Not necessarily looking for soft phones, but if I wanted to see soft phone conferencing, I could absolutely do that. So let me go ahead and get rid of some of my, my search terms here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to focus in on what we call comment, if I could spell it right. So comment is a field that gives us a little additional information on what's happening in a call, and you're going to see this. I'm actually going to show you a couple different ways to break this down. One of the reasons I like the comment field is because it's a little flexible. It's flexible from the perspective of, am I running a Meet Me conference? Am I running a Conference Now conference? Am I just hitting the conference button? So in my particular system here, I don't really have the Meet Me information, but what we would see in a comment field is something pertaining to the type of call that was being placed. So in other words, I did equals, I'm going to go ahead and do starts with, and I'm going to type conference. Now, if this were a Meet Me conference, I'm going to go ahead and type Meet in here, and it's going to bring me back all the Meet Me conferences, and it's going to bring back a lot of pertinent information on those Meet Me conferences. For my demonstration, we're going to go ahead and pick on that finance department again. Here's our finance group, and I'm also going to change my date range. I don't need to see 3,000 records in this particular report, so I'm just going to go ahead and break this down to maybe the current week. Let's see what we pull back here. So what it's doing right now is, again, it's looking at that device type, it's looking at the department and saying, hey, these are all the conference calls that took place. So great information to be able to see, hey, how is my conference software being adopted? Other things, and something that I've done really recently, is people wanted to know that their conferences were being used, but how many people were attending. So we actually used our capacity utilization reporting to show how many people were attending a particular conference. Turned out to be something I wasn't quite aware that we could do until we started delving into it. But let's go ahead and take a look over at our comment section here. So what I can see here is the comment. I chose to search for anything that starts with conference. In my environment, I know that that's conference button, and that's standard for me. If you're doing a Meet Me Now or a Conference Now or something of that nature, that comment may be a little bit different. The nice thing about it is I can come in and say, hey, you know what? I just want to find anything in my comment right here, and this is going to bring me back anything with a comment, and you can very quickly determine what field you want to be able to search off of. But let's take a look at our results. So what I have here are my conference calls. I'm showing who initiated the conference. Great information, but how do I know who all joined this conference? Again, one of the powers and the unique things about Variphy is our ability to do cradle-to-grave reporting. So very easily what I'm going to do is I'm going to export these results. I'm just bringing back my conferences. I'm going to uncheck this because I don't want to save over my VR report here. Just give it a quick name. Carries my search over, so I'm still looking for my finance department, and whoop, I want to change this. Anything that starts with conference. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle on what's called Cradle to Grave. What Cradle to Grave does is it goes out, and what we do is we actually formulate the call records together. And I think I probably grouped on this a little bit still. But what it's going to go ahead and do is it's going to go out, it's going to find my search information. In my case, I'm searching on the conference, and I'm also searching on one particular department. So what I can see here is I have a total number of 94 calls. Now, I did some grouping. I left the grouping on in there. This is probably not important. I was still grouping off of the devices that were being used. But what I really wanted to show is this. So this is the ability to see who's all in these particular conferences. Let's say, for example, I had an end user said, hey, I had a conference, a bunch of people joined. I needed to know who they were. Well, by turning on Cradle to Grave, just running a quick report on a conference, or maybe even their extension, and then filtering on the conference comment, I could bring up the conference that they were in, and here what we're able to show are all of the folks that are joining in each one of these conferences. So what Variphy is doing by enabling Cradle to Grave is we're taking your search, which is what we see in orange, and we're going out and we're going to formulate the rest of what happened outside of my search information. So I can see end users coming in. I can see that 2401 initiated this conference. And out of that, I could see all of the folks that are joining this conference from the 2104. Gives you a lot of power because each one of these values can be filtered on or brought into in many different ways. So one way to run a report on conference and really just kind of start to dig into the weeds of who's on a conference, who's joining conferences and things of that nature, something that we're starting to see a lot of. So we are using this conferencing reporting to be able to do that. Other way to be able to do that, very similar to how we were running reports based on our device types, conference bridges are also device types. So breaking down the same type of information, I could say the originating or terminating device. And in my case, I can go ahead and type in conference bridge software. And there I have conference bridge software. Maybe I have a meeting server. So I can go ahead and do my Cisco meeting server. If I want to see which one's being used more, very much like we ran that previous report, I could do the same thing for my conferences. So who's using my Conference Bridge software over maybe my Cisco meeting server? But I can run a report on that, show how often each one of those is being used, but then also break it down by the people that are using those devices. So here we're going to go ahead and run this report. See very much similar results because now we're just searching the Conference Bridge software and Cisco meeting server. We're still looking at our one individual department, and we're going to be able to see results just for our department, just for those types of meetings. And if I turn that on with Cradle to Grave, I'm going to turn grouping off. I don't think we need that. Give this guy a quick run. And we'll be able to see that Cradle to Grave. We're going to be able to see that for just our finance team and just the folks that are using those particular meeting types. And there we go. And this is a big one right here. So I can see that this is a perfect example. Pop back over to that one. I adjusted my screen size here. This is 18 calls in this conference. So if I needed to say, hey, who's all in this guy, I can absolutely pull this information up. I could start to summarize off of this information. I could build Cradle to Grave search sets off of this information and focusing on these conferences to give you a summary of who was all in this particular conference. So a lot of power behind Variphy, as well as being able to use that Cradle to Grave and search that Cradle to Grave. All right. The last but not least, one of the other things that we see a lot of is, hey, capacity utilization. Everybody needs to know what's going on with their gateways, especially in this new environment with, people being remote, people being all over the place. How are we doing capacity-wise? Are we seeing an influx of call volume, especially with a lot of our medical type establishments? The influx of volume for questions, remote doctors, and things of that nature is really picking up. So what I'm going to do is very quickly walk you through building a capacity utilization report for all of your SIP gateways. And I know we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to do it very quickly. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop over to our report section. I could absolutely build this from the history search and just save a report, but I wanted to show you a couple different interfaces. I'm going to pop over to our report section. I'm going to click Create Report. So we'll just call this cap SIP. Next thing I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to focus in on those device types. I keep punting back to that because that is some of the flexibility and the power behind Variphy is to not have to worry about keying in your devices. I don't want to have to put in my SIP trunks. If you've got a lot of them, it's cumbersome. They get maintained. New ones get added. By using Variphy the way that it's intended to, I can just run a report on my SIP trunks, and now I'm going to show capacity utilization at all of my SIP trunks. Not only am I going to be able to do that, I can include counts, abandonment rates, ring time rates, all of that information. But we're going to go ahead and just keep this general and just add some general capacity utilization for all of my SIP trunks. Next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I said all. Remember, search sets and search set summary is just based on my SIP trunk. But you'll see me punt back to grouping. I'm going to enable data grouping, and I'm going to go ahead and group off of the originating or terminating device name. So now only what I'm going to do is give you capacity at all of your SIP trunks. I'm also going to give you capacity utilization at every one of your SIP gateways without having to worry about going in and adding every single SIP gateway to a particular report. So I've got my search. I'm going to bring back all calls to and from all my SIP gateways. I'm going to go ahead and group that by the originating or terminating device name. And also what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to turn on some statistic tables. I have that right here. So we're going to see breakdowns of activity for each one of those. And I have my search set up. And there we go. Let's give this guy a run. I turned off detail just because capacity reporting doesn't necessarily always need detail. It could be a whole lot of calls. Give this guy a quick run here. Search time window, I'm just doing current day. Let's go ahead and open this up to the current week and see what we get. Now, also, as I'm running this, one of the things to keep in mind is some of these reports I broke down by week. So you're able to see statistics not only for the day that you ran the report, but also each individual week. This is something that's in 12.13. So if you don't have weekly, again, great reason to go ahead and get upgraded. So right now what this report is doing is it's doing a lot of work in the background. It's grabbing all of the calls from all of my SIP gateways. It's going to take all that information. Then it's going to look at the times that those calls start as well as the durations of those calls. And it's going to formulate all that information together and not only show you how much usage you have, but it's going to give you the key thing that you really need to know. And that's how many channels you're using on those SIP gateways. Because looking at a total number of calls is great information. But it's not going to tell you how well am I over trunked, am I under trunked, am I coming close to my capacity. So when you're looking at capacity utilization, that's really where you're going to go ahead and say, hey, this is how many channels I am using on my particular gateway. This is how many channels I'm using on my particular SIP trunk. So like I said, it's doing a lot of work in the background, but what you're going to see is a nice, easy to read report. It's going to give me total capacity at my SIP gateway, and then it's going to go ahead and break down each individual SIP gateway. So let's go ahead and let this guy finish up. There we go. And there we are. So what I added is my grouping. So I have my total grouping. I have my total call counts. I have total number of call counts. But like I said, call count is great, but it doesn't tell you real usage. That's where this bottom part comes in. So now what I'm looking at is I could see throughout the week of this report, I had 45 calls go on at once. This is a great number, but this is what I want to know because that means I was using 45 channels out of all of my SIP gateways. That peak only lasted for about 6 seconds. On average, I'm only using about 9 channels, maybe 10 channels. I chose to include a concurrent call activity. What this guy is doing is it's telling you how many concurrent calls and the percentage of time you're actually utilizing those channels. So it's a great way to be able to say, okay, you know what, hey, I did use 45 channels, but really out of the life of my report, it's not even 0.01% of my available channels. Next thing I did is I turned on grouping. And this guy right here is the fun one because what I'm doing is I'm not only showing you everything that you have at total SIP capacity, but I'm also breaking down the SIP capacity at each individual trunk on a single report. There I have my capacity utilization, how many streams I have available on my average stream utilization, as well as what percent of utilization. So on average for the past week, I've only used about 7.25% of my available capacity. At peak, I used 38% of my available capacity. That peak only lasted about 5 seconds out of a total of 19,000 calls. And I forgot to run this in a PDF. You would see that same information in a chart form down here. So again, very quickly and very easily, we were able to build a nice report for capacity utilization, for monitoring those remote workforces, as well as being able to monitor and look at some of your conference calls and who's joining those calls. Those are probably the 3 biggest things that we're getting asked for during this whole COVID experience, for lack of a better word. So I know we are running low on time, so I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball back, and let's go ahead and get to some Q&A.
Thanks, Vic. We had a few attendees ask to see if there's a dashboard widget that we can build around the soft devices. Do you think you have a few seconds to kind of put one together before we run out of time?
You know what, I do. Do you want to go ahead and pass the ball back over to me, Mike, and let's go ahead and just create a quick widget on some soft phones. All right, let me go ahead and pop over to this guy here. So dashboards and widgets. Everything that we did in reports, we can also build into dashboards and widgets. I've got one over here. It's blank. I just didn't have time to get to it. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a quick widget. I'm going to use it off of my call manager. And for this demonstration, I'll do a call volume by time period. I'm going to go ahead and pick my cluster. And very quickly, what we're going to do is we're going to build a widget using that same search criteria that we were using before. I'll just call this IPC for my IPC communicators. So I can build one off of, again, individual search information, or I can build it based off of the type again. So for this case, what I'm going to build one for is basically just my IP communicators. There we go. Call this guy IPC. I'm going to go ahead and say I want this broken down by day of the week, and we'll go ahead and pick on the current week and see if we have anything in here. So now I've built one based off of my IP communicators, and of course I didn't have anything for this week, so let's go ahead and change this. Actually, I like the IP communicator one. Let me copy it, and we're going to go ahead and just pick on another format. Nice thing about Variphy is that was very simple. I've already got my widget set up. It already has the criteria that I'm looking for in here. So now let's go ahead and build one off of Unified Client Framework. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of IP Communicator here. Let's go ahead and save this guy. And now what we're doing is we're just building one off of a bunch of information that I don't have data for. But that's how easy it is to go ahead and build a widget to be able to produce information. I probably need to adjust my time period. Let's go ahead and break this down. I know I had current and previous month. However, I am starting off of day of week. Let's go ahead and break this down to week and see what we get here. So, but that's how easy it is to go ahead and build a widget. So now we're showing your volumes of calls for each individual week and things of that nature, Mike. So hopefully that helps somebody answer some questions. Again, very easy. We're just going to go ahead and steal that same search criteria that we were using in reports and build different widgets based on what we want to see.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question we had was, can we report on WebEx conferences? The answer to this is kind of a yes and kind of a no. We can see who's dialing into WebEx. When you build a report with like the original or final call party number is the number or numbers used to dial into WebEx. We can run a report that way and show counts. If you want to see who's having WebEx call them, you could run a report where the calling party number is the WebEx caller ID. Okay, and I see a question from Brad about an alert mechanism based upon call stream capacity. Dan answered that. Our alerting right now, our alerting right now is done per call, but not on a threshold of calls. But you can build an alert based upon like cause codes to kind of alert you when calls are failing.
From alerting works very much like our standard searching does. So if I was concerned with call failures, I can absolutely build a report on originating or terminating cause codes and choose particular failures like out of bandwidth, network out of order, out of bandwidth. And then what this will do is anytime we see one of these, anytime we see one of these, we'll go ahead and send an email with all the pertinent information to whoever the recipient is, and then they'll be able to get an email with that information detailing the call, the type of call, when the call dropped, who was involved in the call, and things like that. All right. Any other questions, Mike?
That's it for now.
Well, hey, I want to thank everybody for attending. Please navigate over to Variphy.com. We do webinars every single Wednesday. And if you haven't signed up yet, I urge you to go ahead and go over to Variphy.com/party and sign up for a block party where we'll be giving away some prizes, doing some live demonstrations, have a little mixology course, and just kind of making it fun and keeping it interesting.
Excellent job, Victor. Thanks so much to Jerry Lee. Yes, we will be sharing the recording. Once we get the link, we'll post it to our webpage. Also, so it's time to announce the winners. Let me share on my screen here real quick. So congratulations to Max DeLille. Thank you for attending today's webinar. We'll be in touch here shortly to see how we could get that gift card over to you. And last but not least, we want to thank everyone for attending today. We know you guys got busy schedules. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit more about Variphy. Just as Victor kind of mentioned here, a quick plug into our block party here that we'll be hosting in early June here. $10,000 and over in prizes. This is a 100% virtual event. June 1st and 2nd, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific. We've seen a lot of registrations, so please, if you have not yet registered, please consider registering with us. We'd love to have you. So again, thank you everyone for attending, and we'll see you next week. Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.